Yo, today I want to talk about the different knockdowns we can inflict on monsters, and then afterwards discuss how to punish a monster with every weapon. I also would like to mention that not everything in this video being talked about comes from my own noggin, but came from the Monster Hunter Gathering Hall Discord, and I'll bring this up again when I go over things that I found over there. There's quite a few people there who put in a lot of time to figure different things out, and it wouldn't be fair to not mention them at all. So, let's get into knockdowns. For starters, we have our basic. If we attack a monster's legs or arms enough, eventually we'll reach a threshold that'll force the monster down onto the ground for a good amount of time. Attacking a monster's head with attacks that deal exhaust or stun will eventually build up the KO status, which causes a monster to fall over. These knockdowns are a bit lengthy, and an important thing to keep in mind is that when a monster recovers, they actually have to sort of recover their senses before they can start attacking again. And this little animation can be the thing that allows us to commit to maybe one more attack. Don't confuse these with simply flashing a monster in the air. Breaking certain parts on certain monsters will actually reward the player with an opportunity to deal even more damage because the monster will fall over. You'll only ever see this once a hunt, unfortunately, and if you aren't running Hellfire Cloak level 3 or 4, you'll only see this sort of knockdown with 3 different monsters. When you do knock a monster over with this, it tends to be very short, so we can't use any longer options to punish unless we have a sort of pre-setup in mind. Dealing enough damage to parts of a monster will cause it to flinch, but when a monster is in midair, it can't flinch unless it can fly and was already flying when it occurred. In place of a flinch, the monster will instead fall from the sky and lay down on the ground for a decent amount of time, allowing us to attack. When exhaust procs, a monster will flinch and a nasty green substance spews from its mouth to signify it's a flinch caused by the exhaust status specifically. If you can kind of catch my drift, if we trigger this in midair, the monster will fall and be knocked down for a moment. What's nice about this one in particular is that if we run any sort of ranged exhaust option, we can count our shots and try to time the proc so the monster is midair and get it knocked down whenever we want. This is no easy feat though, however. When a monster is feeling fatigued, after using a certain attack, they'll fall over for a short while. If you can learn when these are about to come out, you can definitely exploit these, even if they can be a bit short. After a successful wall slam, the monster will for an extremely brief moment be knocked down. This is a bit of a catfish, so if you aren't right there when it happens, I would get ready for any immediate attacks or use very low commitment follow-ups. After introducing a monster to a wall, you get a knockdown that lasts a pretty decent amount of time. When some monsters power up, we can get a knockdown if we deal enough damage to a specific part, usually the head. We don't always get a knockdown. Take the Metal Wraths for an example, so keep that in mind, but if we know we can get a knockdown, we should try to focus those parts so we can get that extra damage, even if it seems a bit scary. You probably already know this, but if we deal enough damage to afflicted monsters, instead of exploding, they'll fall over for a long time and are exhausted afterwards. So that's quite a few ways of knocking a monster down, right? I wouldn't really stress about remembering how long certain knockdowns are for specific monsters, because it'll just come from experience. But I would say you should try to always remember that a monster being KO'd will be slightly longer than all other knockdowns due to that little animation that plays. I would also pay attention to the afflicted and transformation knockdowns, since we can get those just by playing the game, and they tend to last a while too. So, having gone over all those different knockdowns, when a monster is downed, what do? Attack, obviously, but how do we maximize our damage as much as we can so these opportunities aren't wasted too much? I'll go over the different loops and strategies we should keep in mind so we aren't just pressing buttons. So, let's get into it. With Greatsword, we really just want to make sure we have Power Sheath up often, and that's just general advice really. So consider running Wirebug Whisperer level 1 so we can keep that third Wirebug a little bit longer. When a monster is downed, drop a bomb, strong arm stance, and then TCS. Not much else to really say. If you dare to defy your fate and not use strong arm stance, and hopefully adamant charge slash instead, consider using that wire bug move to close a gap so we can hit that strong charge slash and then go straight to TCS afterwards. If we don't want to do that, then we can just sprint forward and overhead slash, and then depending on the time we have, we can mix up uncharged or charged slashes until we reach TCS. Obviously, the first two slashes are a lot weaker than TCS, but if we can include those two, why not, right? Sometimes we might not even be able to fit a TCS, and we have to just charge the first or second overhead instead. This is also extremely shoehorned in because I actually forgot, but you can replace every TCS I set with a rage slash if you are running it. If you're feeling brave, you could 50-50 a monster's first attack upon standing up to buff the rage slash, but if there's a follow-up of some kind, then you could end up training in a really embarrassing way. Red gauge is crucial. We want to be at this level so when we are using any of our strong options like Sacred Sheath, Serene Pose, or even Helmbreaker, we do the most damage possible. When a monster is downed, we're hopefully at red gauge already so we can use those strong options. On the off chance we aren't at red gauge, then we should try to reach it as quick as possible. We can of course just do our generic spirit combo, or we can involve some bombs in case we don't have enough spirit to execute the combo finisher, or to just increase our level faster. It'll depend on if you're using Sacred or Special Sheath on what you'll do when a monster is downed, but the very last option you should consider using is Soaring Kick. It got a huge nerf in Sunbreak in terms of cooldown, and using this seriously jeopardizes your wire bug management. If you have 3 or 4 wire bugs, then a Soaring Kick isn't the worst thing ever, but if you only have 2, maybe put that on the back burner unless you're very confident you won't need that bug for anything else. The lateral loop is our nice go-to for sustained damage. It's a good combo that involves both raw and element and is pretty quick and has low commitment. If we're running raw or status, a slightly better but longer combo to execute is the full lateral slash combo, back hop, execute the full perfect rush, and end with the shield bash. In short opportunities or when a monster is about to stand, we can burst or end our loop with the full lateral slash combo into a spinning reaper and cancel with the roll. If we're feeling a bit fancy and resourceful, we can bring a large barrel bomb and use it to proc our own Metsu Shoryugeki in case you want to force a stun with using the shield finisher. Sword and Shield is pretty simple and doesn't require much management. To keep life simple, just using the lateral loop will get you through hunting pretty easy. This one is fairly complicated. First, you'll want to use Spiral Slash. After that's over, form a slash, and then Spiral Slash again. If you can't Spiral Slash, whether it's due to a lack of wire bugs, or you've awakened and rebuked the meta law, then you'll want to do the full combo up to 6-fold slash and then Demon Dance spam, similar to what you would do in World. If running it, all we have to do is manage our impact burst, and that's more important if we're running courage than strength. And a neat thing is that even if we don't have it active, we can just activate it on the monster's head. So if you have a shorter knockdown, you can use that moment to breathe and reactivate it, and maybe even stun the monster. If we're running strength, our focus is level 3 charge spam. Just make sure not to move so we do more damage, and if we sense that the monster is about to get up and move, we can execute the moving one, which is weaker but has less commitment and allows us to act sooner. If you're an Impact Creator fan, you can power charge level 3 slam, power down into a regular level 3 state, and then execute a maxed out Impact Creator. You'll have to recharge your hammer, so I would use this if you have the feeling a monster is bound to get up sooner, but not real soon. For courage, just spam charge attacks. That's kind of it. Generally, we'll be using the multi-crush in the kick-up loop. For Hunting Horn, it is very important we have Silkbind Shockwave up often, since a lot of our damage will come from that, especially if we're using Element. Shield Advance. Thrust. shoot advance, thrust, shoot advance, thrust. I recommend running Frenzied Bloodlust and Wirebook Whisperer 1. With Gunlance, we'll generally be spamming reverse blast dash into an overhead, and then what we do after that slightly changes depending on the shell type we're using. For normal shelling, you'll full burst after the overhead and then go into an erupting cannon. After this, you can decide on a quick reload into another slam or a reverse blast dash. It's really up to you. For wide, you probably won't want to full burst after a reverse blast dash because you're missing 1 out of 3 shells. Just go for an overhead slam instead, and then quick reload into a full burst if you choose, and then erupting cannon. And if you're using long, you'll have the same strategy in mind. If you choose to buff your shells, then you can use ground splitter and try to reposition towards the head or whatever spot you're attacking, and then go into your reverse blast dash rave. If you choose to use hail cutter, then if possible, I suggest trying to use it in midair after reverse blast dash by aerial shelling. This move will reload for you anyways, and it is the strongest melee attack Gunlance has. Of course, you can still use it if you're on the ground, it'll just be longer. Gunlance doesn't exactly have a loop since its attacks are a bit lengthy, so you do sort of just have to respond to the situation at that time and factor whatever Wirebook moves you have at that moment. Run Rapid Morph 3. Double slash, morph attack twice, double slash, morph attack twice. Super easy stuff. This combo improves a ton with an Amp sword, so I really suggest learning Elemental Burst Counter. Swax is in a league of its own when it comes to damage, just make sure to keep that sword active. Assuming we're leaning into the SAED playstyle, we want to have a charged shield and files ready. The charged shield is pretty easy. Just make sure to refill it with max files so it stays active for as long as possible. Files will be slightly more tricky if we're SAEDing on free opportunities, since you could get a knockdown because of the SAED itself. Focus and load up will allow you to fill files easily when the monster is down, and Morphing Advance will allow you to reposition towards the best hit zone to hit with an SAED, assuming you're using Element. Charger Blade requires resource management, but there's no real loop. You just big slam everything. If we're using Spinning Axe and hopefully Ready Stance, then we have a pretty easy loop. We'll just want to run Wind Mantle and maybe Frenzied Bloodlust just so we can get into the loop and perform it easily. We'll want to perform Element Discharge up to 2, and then activate Ready Stance. We'll cancel Ready Stance and go into another Elemental Discharge 2. If you want a micro position, we can move the left stick forward and perform an Element Discharge 1, and then get back into that main loop. Depending on if we're running Raw or Element will determine which switch skill we'll want to use. But we want to land our Tornado Slash or Tetraseal Slash as much as we can. In terms of sustained damage, we're going to use our loop Strong Thrust into Wide Sweep into either Tornado or Tetraseal. Another powerful attack we have is the Diving Wyvern, and this should be a move that's used regardless of if we're running Raw or Element, but I will say Raw Insect Glaive will favor this move more, and Elemental Insect Glaive will favor Tetraseal more. Consider setting up a Diving Wyvern if there's a gap that needs to be closed, since after a Diving Wyvern, we can perform a Wide Sweep, and then go into either Tornado or Tetraseal and perform our loop. Just stand in critical range. If you need to reposition and you have Fanning Maneuver, try using that to put yourself in range and also buff yourself. We also want to just stand in critical range. We have fat rolls, so just roll to wherever you need to go and set up the glowing circle if you require it. You'll pretty much just want to apply a stake thrust and reapply buffs. Bolt Boost is pretty quick and lasts a long time, and Herculean Draw can act as a repositioning tool to get us towards our critical or super critical range and buff ourselves at the same time. Once we're all good, we just want to dash dance in that range and spam shots and power shots. If we're at the max bow level, maybe sprinkle in aerial aim every now and then. That's really it. So, that's it I guess. A lot of this might be obvious, and if it is, then thanks for getting to this point anyways. I just feel like I see players online press buttons, which obviously does damage, right? But why not press the right buttons for the right reasons? I don't really have a whole lot to say in terms of closing thoughts, other than I hope you get take something away from this video and maybe be inspired to try out a weapon or something. I don't know. Anyways, make sure to like, comment, and share with all your hunting friends, and maybe check out my Twitch. See ya.